Alright guys, if you're going to want to kick out one of your villagers, whether it's just anybody because you're trying to get another villager, or whether it's a specific villager, by far the easiest and fastest, most efficient way is to use time traveling and utilize time traveling. But if you do not want to time travel, there is other ways, and we will cover that later in the video. But the easiest way, like I said, is going to be time traveling, and it's way quicker than if you weren't time traveling at all. But if you are not sure about time traveling, let me tell you that it's not going to influence your game that much, although you may have more weeds in the game if you skip time, and your hair can get messed up, your actual character's hair, but you can always fix that, pick up the weeds, things like that. And there are achievements where you might want to actually sell the weeds or whatever for Nook Miles achievements, so there could be some benefits to that actually. But yeah, so you're gonna have to decide whether you want to time travel, and if you are okay with time traveling, then this is gonna be the easiest way to kick out your villagers. Now we're gonna start with the time traveling method, and then we're gonna go to the time traveling method. Now it's not really a definitive method for the time traveling method, but there is a solid, for sure way that you can keep using if you are able to time travel in order to kick out your villagers. Basically, you're going to want to look at what date you actually are on the game. You're going to save and then skip up a month. So you're basically going to go to the system settings, go to the system date and time, skip it up 1 month, go back to your game, save it, close it, and reopen it. Or you can just save your game, close it, change the time, and come back in. Either way, you're going to want to make sure that you close the game before coming back in after you save it, and then skip up your date, because you want to make sure you can't just change your date and then continue the game, because it doesn't change like that. You have to close the game for it to open on that next date. As soon as you change your date up a month, you're actually going to want to skip back a month from that point. Once you open up your game in that time, you're going to save it again and go back a month. So now you're going to be back kind of where you start on the same exact date. From there, you're going to want to try to beat the autosave. So you're going to actually have to run around your village looking for your villagers and see if they have the little thought bubble that may mean that they want to move out. So I'm actually going to recommend that the time of day that you pick to go return to when you move back to that same month is the middle of the day sometime, when most of the villagers are out. Some of the villagers may sleep in, some of them may go to bed early, but the middle of the day, for the most part, most of them will be outside around their houses. So in order to maximize the amount of villagers you can see in that 3-minute window you have, you're going to want to make sure that you have the middle of the day. If not, it may just be a little bit more difficult and more of a time-consuming process in order to kick out your villagers. So anyway, as you're running around your town looking for the villagers, once you find someone with a thought bubble, you got to determine whether that's the villager you want to kick out. If it doesn't matter, obviously go talk to them, see if they want to be kicked out. If it's not the case, or if that's not the villager you want, or you can't find someone with a thought bubble quick enough, you're going to want to close the game without saving before that 3-minute window. Otherwise, you could mess things up there, as it's going to automatically save, and it's going to be more difficult to find someone with the thought bubble. Now, if you find someone who tries to get your attention, like some of the villagers will automatically call out your name, and there's going to be the exclamation point as they want to talk to you, and it's not the thought bubble, that means that there's not going to be a thought bubble, meaning you're going to have to close your game as well. Then once you close your game, you're going to want to go to your system settings again and then skip up a day. So you're going to want to go, let's say you were on January 1st, to start the whole process. You would have gone to February 1st and then back to January 1st, and now you're going to go to January 2nd. And then from there, you're going to run around your town. You're going to look if you can find the villager that you want with the thought bubble. Then you're going to talk to them and kick them out. So basically, you're going to repeat this process over and over, where if it's not the villager you want to kick out with the thought bubble, you're going to close your game without saving and before that 3-minute window ends, and then you're going to go to the system settings and skip ahead a day. So you're going to keep on doing that over and over until you finally get to the villager. Now, that's for all the time traveling people out there. If you do not want to time travel in your game, then what you're basically going to have to do is you're going to have to ignore your villagers for an extended period of time. So let's say you want to kick out one specific villager. All the other villagers, I would recommend to talk to those villagers frequently. So it's almost like that villager that you want to get kicked out is getting singled out. So you're going to ignore the villager that you want to talk to, or that you want kicked out, sorry, and you're going to talk to the others. You can maybe give gifts to all the other villagers besides the one you want kicked out, and then you can also go inside if the villager you want kicked out is inside their house. You can actually go inside their house and then just leave. When you leave their house, they're going to get a little question mark above their head as you leave, and they're kind of confused why you leave and why you're ignoring them. You can do that a couple times. I recommend that a couple times, but if you give it too much, you don't want to show too much attention towards the villager. If you show too much attention, even negative attention, right? Because in previous games, people thought that hitting them with a net or an axe and things like that, or pushing them around and getting them angry was a way to help get them out, or reporting them to Isabelle or whatever in the town hall or whatever. But it almost seems like that is not the case in this game. Getting them mad and stuff like that may seem like it's doing something, and it may help in some cases, but it doesn't really actually help that much, because when you're doing that, you're giving them attention, which is enough to keep them on your island, even if they're not too happy with you. So in order to actually try to get them kicked off without time traveling, you're basically going to want to ignore them, not even have any type of attention hitting them with nets and anything. So eventually, when you ignore them enough, you may boot up the game and you'll see that little thought bubble above their head, and it's going to be a chance for you to kick them out. Now, if you see somebody else with a thought bubble and you don't want them to leave, it's almost better to actually not talk to them. If you don't talk with them, you can close the game if you just don't save, if it's within the first few minutes of booting up, and do the time travel style method where you wait for the next day. And then when you wait for the next day, and you technically did not experience that thought bubble before the autosave, if you wait instead of doing the time travel method where you skip ahead, then there's a good chance that thought bubble will go on to somebody else in your village. It could still be the same villager, but it may not be. And if it's not the same villager that it moves on, and if it's not the same villager, then it might be the villager you want to actually kick out. Now, obviously, this method is not going to be as effective as time traveling, because especially if you boot up the game and you're just about to play, you plan on playing for a couple hours of the day, and then you find someone with a thought bubble that you don't want to kick out, but you were planning on kicking somebody else out. The most effective way to make sure somebody else is going to get the thought bubble the next day would be to close the game without saving within the first 3 minutes, if that's before it autosaves. And if it autosaves, then you're probably not going to be as likely for another villager to move out, because that's just how the game's coded. You're not as likely to encounter those thought bubbles or those people moving and those messages a day or so after you encounter the last one. The only reason why it works in the time travel method is because it hasn't saved, so that kind of passes on because you haven't even encountered that event. So that's why it's kind of neat the way that works. So if you don't time travel, you're going to have to do that very early to when you boot up the game before the autosave. So that's why if you're doing this, almost like a mix of the time travel method and the non-time travel method, if you're not time traveling, then you're going to want to make sure you play the game. If you're going to play the game at a specific point in the day, it's probably the middle of the day when the villagers are most likely outside. As the villagers being outside their homes gives you a better chance to actually see if any of them have a thought bubble. If they're all inside their houses, there's less of a chance that that's actually going to happen. So once you eventually encounter that thought bubble, then when you skip ahead to the next day, with the time travel method, you're able to actually pass that on to the villager you want, or like we're saying, if you don't time travel, you can just wait for the next day, which is definitely a good option. So if you are able to time travel, though, this method is a lot faster. Definitely recommend if you can, because you're just able to do this. You could spend one day and you could kick out maybe 1 or 2 villagers. Whereas if you're not doing this, I've found that it takes sometimes a week or 2 weeks, depending on your luck of the game. Some of it is all luck when it comes to which villagers are going to get the bubble. Ignoring them does make it a lot easier, I've found, because I've tried to do it without that, and just giving them negative attention, like I was saying earlier, doesn't really have much of an effect. It really didn't help at all. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the time travel method. That's pretty much it. It's not very difficult. You're just gonna have to follow those basic steps. Skipping ahead the month, going back a month, and then looking for that villager with the thought bubble above their head, and going ahead each day one by one, looking to see if you can find the villager that you want to move out.